Good morning, everyone. Jim Laird here from beautiful, sunny, sort of sunny, uh, Largo, Florida. Dr. Stillman will not be joining me today. He has some appointments he needs to go to this morning. So you're stuck with me. But I would recommend in the comments checking out his masterclass, which he's done two of, one on iodine, one on cholesterol. Gotten lots of great feedback. Totally free. If you do want to have some input on what he discusses and teaches, if you join his Substack, and you can go to his link tree to do that, or my link tree, I think I have his Substack in there too. And you become a premium member, then you can help kind of decide what topics we're going to cover on those master classes. But there's a playlist below. He's done one on iodine, one on cholesterol. He's gotten a ton of great feedback from it. So that's something we're going to continue to do every Monday at 3 p.m. And I'm gonna basically set all this stuff up in the future so you can look and see. I'm gonna start setting the 9 o'clocks up ahead of time. Just haven't had time to do it, but then his master classes are going to set those up every week so that they're there and you can set a reminder. Makes it a lot easier for you. Today's discussion, there's a YouTube video below, and it's interesting. You know, I haven't, over the years, I was doing YouTube long before it was popular. If you go way back in my channel, there's videos from forever and ever ago. I have a video that called Prowler Sled Hell that's been copied and shared everywhere. That was like me sprinting with a prowler, dragging a sled behind me. That's been all over the internet, but I was never really consistent about my YouTube posting, and so now I'm trying to do a better job of being more consistent. But because of TikTok, really people's attention spans have really plummeted, and so there's only most people don't dive into the deeper, longer content. Some do, but most are scrolling, and then they're looking for these real short clips. So two of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel, one is how to increase motivation. I basically just like improve your health. The healthier you are, the better you're going to feel, the more motivation you're going to have. That was basically the premise of it, and it got tons and tons and tons of views. The one recently was basically what most people don't understand, this simple fact that just about everything becomes a toxin at the right dose, right? And I'd originally heard Tim Ferriss talk about this, and it was really interesting, in our practice, in our coaching practice, and I get to see the medical side of things as well. We really have a lot of discussions about people who get married to certain things, and they're for example, I will like talking to somebody who's really just bound and determined to only eat carnivore, right? And Dr. Terry Walls, who wrote a book called The Walls Protocol, who's done a really great job managing her MS through diet, lifestyle change. They had her on the show, and it was really interesting. They started going after her about the toxins in vegetables, right? Which there are. There's vegetables have certain things in them, but she made the observation / argument and kind of spun it right around on them. They're like, do you do cold plunge? Do you do sauna? Do you lift weights? Do you exercise? Those are stresses. Those are hormetic stresses at the right dose actually make you improve. And she was like, these different vegetables, these different things that we eat, they have things in them that create a hormetic stress that drive an adaptation. And at the right dose, they're great. Now, obviously, too much of a certain thing, certain people can't handle things like gluten. I don't like obsessively avoid gluten. I used to years ago. I kind of fell into that gluten-free thing for a while. And I recommend most people that are struggling with autoimmune issues and things like that, that's definitely something you want to avoid. And some people are highly sensitive to it. But I've noticed as I get out more in the sun and my immune system's in a better place, I can get away with a lot more, which doesn't mean I do that. I just choose not to eat gluten-containing foods because there's so many better foods I can eat that just have a lot more nutrition and a lot more valuable things to offer, right? So you'll get these people that are stuck, like I'm only going to eat meat. And then you look at their labs, they've been doing it for 6 months, a year. They felt great in the beginning, and then things are starting to fall apart. They're lacking, a lot of essential nutrients. They're lacking, especially their minerals are all over the place. They're training really hard, and then they start tanking, and they're so married to the fact that they're only going to eat meat, or they're vegetarian and they're only going to eat vegetables, right? And people lose sight of the fact that, all these things in doses, whether it's exercise or I mean anything really, there's people out there that'll say all you have to do is go out in the sun and that's going to fix everything. There's very few. I mean, it's like, why not work on everything? Why not improve your diet? Why not get out in the sun more? Why not limit, your EMF, improve the water quality? These people want to make it so that it's like a one trick pony, right? And it's very frustrating too. And then people will sell people on stuff like you have to eat this way. Well, if that diet is unenjoyable for somebody and they don't actually like eating the food and it's not fulfilling to them, you have to educate people. Like if your diet is all Twinkies and stuff, like over time you're going to have problems. But you can't just tell people you can only eat this food or only eat that food or only eat this food. It's just you have to give people things like actually are sustainable, right? And people have to come to those conclusions kind of on their own. And a lot of it almost becomes like the fire and brimstone televangelical preacher, where it's my way or the highway, right? And so life doesn't work like that, unfortunately. I wish it was that simple. There are certain things that are hard and fast, but in most cases, there's a little wiggle room, especially when it comes to exercise. What's going to destroy one person might be a recovery day for another person, right? So there has to be context for the individual. And, for example, everybody's big on fasting. I think fasting's great. But if you're a woman who's breastfeeding, fasting is probably not a good strategy, so there has to be context. And a lot of people have a really hard time putting things into context of whether this modality is good for them. And if we look at like traditional cultures, they eat a wide variety of foods that basically change with the seasons. They eat what's in their local environment. They're obviously spending a lot of time outside. They're not under massive amounts of chronic stress. Hunter-gatherer tribes, they have stress. They're doing lots of low-level manual labor. We're the opposite. We live in a temperature-controlled environment that doesn't change year-round. It's like 70 degrees in your house year-round. Most people are spending 90% of their day inside, which causes huge issues with our biology. We have an abundance of empty calories that provide very little nutrition, and we do absolutely no manual labor, and we try to basically go make up for that by going and exercising indoors, and usually at a high intensity, right? So instead of doing that low level manual labor and then adding intensity from time to time, it's like, well, I've sat in my desk for 10 hours today, so I'm going to go try and make up for that by doing a 45-minute HIIT class or a 45-minute boot camp or whatever. And it just doesn't really end well for most people in that situation, right? There are outliers. There's people that can get away with all sorts of things. So the key is you have to look at yourself and do a self-assessment of like, okay, what's my lifestyle? What am I willing to give up? And the difference between myself and a lot of other people is I will meet people where they're at and actually help them improve, and then allow them to decide, hey, I need to make these changes in my life if I'm going to see, instead of saying, well, unless you do this, you're done, right? I've seen so many people over the years, and even, like 25 years ago, before I knew all the circadian stuff, I've seen plenty of people improve blood work, improve their health, lose weight without, outside being a priority, right? I would tell people to go outside and walk, but I didn't really understand the importance of it like I do now. Now I can get better by combining like the circadian stuff and the quantum stuff with getting people to not eat like an asshole, combined with, getting more sleep and moderate exercise, I can get results a lot faster with a lot less like suffering than before. But all these things work in different ways, and they all work together as a giant like snowball, right? And there are people, and I think like, here's the thing that I've seen, particularly with like things like diet. There's some simple truths. You have to control blood sugar, right? You have to manage blood sugar and calorie load. Obviously, we don't want to be eating massive amounts of energy that go way over your activity level. That can create problems in your metabolism, right? You can manage blood sugar with diet, but you can also, most people have no idea how much natural light, the sun, actually affects your blood sugar. You can also help manage blood sugar with the sun. You can also manage blood sugar by going for walks outside after your meals, which is great too. That also manages blood sugar. So you have to have metabolic flexibility where you can, a healthy human is going to be able to fast. They're also going to be able to eat a piece of chocolate cake and not fall over, like, have like a humongous sugar issue, right? You should be able to do both, right? And so that's metabolic flexibility, right? And we can manage those things with multiple things. We can do it through diet, we can do it through walking outside, getting in the sun more. All these things just make it a lot easier, right? So managing, getting blood sugar under control, getting outside more, fixing your circadian rhythm, those things are super important. So, like, I used to do a podcast with a guy named Kiefer, and he's kind of fallen off the earth. I don't know what he's doing now. The last time I heard, he was in Europe, but he had a protocol, called Carb Night, which I really liked because people, a lot of people that are broken metabolically, if they go on a low carb diet for a little while, it helps them kind of reset things. So he would basically say, you're going to eat low carb for 5 or 6 days, 7 days, and then you would have a carb night where you would have starch. He was into junk. He liked using junk food for that to give people a reward. He would do it post training, but they would have this carb night, and it would, spike insulin. It would kind of fire that whole pathway up. You saw much less, like, women would do really well on that. They wouldn't have like the the thyroid downregulation and all these different things that come from lady, and the sleep issues that would come from these, like, women we see that train really hard that are on a low carb diet. They usually just don't do well over time. So that whack of carbs every 5 to 6 days would do great. And as the person would lean out, they would add more starch post training, and that starch would fuel the next training session to replenish glycogen levels. So it was a great balance between the two, and most people really enjoyed. And I still eat more or less like that. I eat lower carb during the day, and I use most of my carbs. I want to earn my carbohydrates. I eat them post training. I also live in Florida. I try to eat seasonally so I can eat a little more starch because I live, in a sunny environment most of the year. So I don't. And when I was in Lexington, I would eat a little more low carbish in the wintertime, but I would still have a little bit of starch after my training sessions because I wanted to be able to train a little bit harder, and adding a little bit of starch post training allows to do that. So a lot of people get locked into one thing, right? And you have to be flexible to use the right tools for the job at the right time, right? And a lot of people get so fixated on whether I'm only going to eat meat, I'm only going to eat vegetables, I'm only going to do HIIT, I'm only going to lift weights. There has to be a wide variety of variability. You can't get locked in and focused on one thing. Unless you want to be an ultra high level performer, then you kind of have to lock in on one thing or two things, but then you're going to sacrifice health and well-being, right? And even in that case, you can manage things through proper recovery, proper stress management, and of course, so you get into PEDs and all that good stuff, peptides and all the things. But people also don't realize, for the normal everyday person, they don't have the time to do all the things. Like, you look at these like professional fighters, you look at like pro bodybuilders, they're literally just training, sleeping, and eating if they're smart. And there are some guys that can train eat, go out and do shenanigans and get away with it for a little while. As they get older, they can't get away with it as much. But most people don't understand to have like an elite level body, an elite level physique, unless you're genetically gifted. Even if you are genetically gifted, it takes work and it takes time. And most people with their lifestyle don't have the time to invest everything into how they look and how they perform. So the key is to do enough to get the results that you want. And after talking to hundreds of thousands of people in the last 25, 30 years, when I sit them down, that most people want three things. They want to look good, they want to feel better, and they want to look good naked. And the formula to that is basically walk outside 3 times a day. That's minimum. You can walk outside a little bit more than that. That'd be great. Eat a protein at every meal. And I was listening to, and I think Dr. Stillman and I will discuss this, but Mark Sisson was talking to a guy, and I really respect Mark. He's been in it a long time, gives a lot of people a lot of great advice. He talks about like the first 100 grams of protein shouldn't even be counted against your calorie load, because it's pretty much going into like brain chemistry and muscle repair and all these different things. He's like, it shouldn't even count towards your total calories. And I found that very interesting. And also, protein takes a lot more energy to actually break down and use, right? So it raises your metabolic rate. So that was a really interesting perspective that I heard him talk about on an interview. Eat a protein at every meal. That's going to give you the blood sugar control. It's going to give you the muscle that you want. Skin, hair, all that stuff. The amino acids you need to sleep. All these different things, right? Drink high quality water. There's so much garbage in the water today, from birth control to chemicals, pesticides. We recommend RO filtered water, adding concentrates, or we just buy spring water in the big 5-gallon containers, and that's super important. Get the lights off at night. I can't stress how important your circadian rhythm is. If you get the lights off at night, you get off your phones, you get a good night's sleep, that's really going to help. Plugging your Wi-Fi is part of that. And then have community. You could be, doing all the things, but if you don't have connection, community, you're going to have a really hard time. And I mean, there's certain people that can live on a desert island by themselves and do just fine. There's people that are wired differently, but most humans need a physical, emotional connection. And that's something, having a community that you get along with and that you have a good time with. I'm moving to a rental house, Brooke Ramsey pillow. Well, the problem, Brooke, is we're kind of dealing with this right now, because Dr. Stillman and I share a house. That's a great question, by the way. Dr. Stillman and I share a house that we rent, and basically we either buy, because the RO, it's an RO filter. There's a bunch of them out there, but they're very expensive, and it's a pain in the butt to install. So we actually have a whole bucket of filter parts that Dr. Stillman has from his house that he owned. But he doesn't want to go through the trouble of installing all that and then basically, leaving, because it's a big pain in the ass to basically unhook. So we do two things. We go to Publix, or we go to one of the Walmart grocery neighborhood markets. They have a RO filter that runs it through UV, and we filter that out, and it basically removes just about everything. And then we add concentrates. You can use concentrates. It's a blue bottle about this big. We put 2 drops in 8 ounces of water. Don't follow the instructions on the bottle. It's going to tell you to put like 10 or 20 drops in there, and it's going to taste like paint thinner. I mean, it's strong. And there might be some people that need to load minerals like that, but 2 drops is fine. But recently we switched back over to spring water from one of the local springs here. And we've noticed that we enjoy the taste a lot better, and also it just makes us feel better. So we have a bunch of the RO water on backup for emergency, and then we buy the spring water. They have a delivery service here that's actually pretty reasonable, and they just deliver like 5. Every couple of weeks they deliver like 5 gallons to your door. So that would be my recommendation. That way you don't spend like thousands of dollars on a filtration system, install it, and then you end up staying there for a year, and then you got to like take it all out, so that would be my recommendation. But if you type in Dr. Stillman and water, he's got some blog posts and things like that on the specifics. I have in my bathroom, I have a filter on my shower. All the water we use for cooking, we get from those 5 gallons that we buy, right? So we have a little, if you go on Amazon, the devil, but it's so good at the same time. If you go on Amazon, they have these electric pumps. We actually have a manual pump too, just in case, like, electricity goes out or whatever the powers that be, whatever the powers that be, whatever crisis is next. But they have these pumps that you can charge electrically that has a nice little water line in it, and you put it in there, and then it just pumps the water out for you. But we always use the spring water or the RO water for our cooking as well. And then the shower, I just put you can buy a $20 shower head filter. I use that. So that's basically it. But I don't stress about that too much. I think it is important, like we have a pool that has chlorine in it, and Dr. Stillman and I are like, well, it's not great, but I don't think the levels are at the point of being extremely harmful, especially with all the other things we do. There comes a point where it's just like, if you get too hyper focused on things, it almost becomes a bigger stress than it is, so we kind of take one for the, we actually, one of the things that helps our pool actually is there's actually a leak in the pool. And the people that own this house are not conducive to take care of it. So our water is constantly being, refreshed. So the chlorine load is very, very low. So you're welcome, Brett. For insect repellent, that's a good question. I would go look. Bugs have, ever since I've gotten. That's a great question, Dave. But ever since I've gotten my circadian rhythm in order, and I've gotten more sun, and my, obviously my melanin levels are a lot higher than the average, Scottish Canadian dude. Bugs don't really bug me that much, but I would look at, if you go back and look at you look at what some of the Native Americans did for bug repellent. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's certain plants and plant extracts that tend to, mosquitoes and things like that don't like. There's all these really cool mosquito zappers now that they make a sound that mosquitoes like, and then they nuke them. That's something I would look at. But I would look into traditional cultures and some of the things they would use for bug repellent. But honestly, I spend we have tons of mosquitoes here, and they really don't bother me that much. Then again, if you're in a place like northern Canada where I grew up, and you wear head nets and things like that because they were just so ridiculously ridiculous, and if you do have to use bug repellent, what I would recommend, like if you're getting into a situation where you're going to be in the deep woods and you're going to be around a lot of ticks and things like that, is I would spray your clothes down, like the outer layer of your clothes, the night before with bug repellent, so you're not putting it directly on your skin. So that's kind of a workaround, because I've spent a lot of time in the deep like wilderness, Arctic / things, and we would spray our clothes down with bug repellent on the outside, so it's not directly on the skin. I would avoid spraying just about anything that isn't like natural animal based on your skin. So I hope that answers your question, Dave. And Dr. Stillman can give his opinion on that on Thursday when we chat in Optimum Male Vitality. James, thank you so much. I really appreciate the feedback. It's really nice. It's nice to know that I'm having some sort of a difference, that I help some people. It's really funny because YouTube, and these TikTok things, they push out these really short videos. If you go to the link in the description and watch the video I posted on anything can be toxic, even oxygen, and people don't realize that if at a certain level, oxygen becomes toxic. You actually die from too much oxygen, right? So anything is toxic at the right dose. The comments in the video, comment section are absolutely hilarious. And you'll have people like, just blatant, just trashing you and stuff. I find it hilarious. It's interesting that people have so little to do in their lives that they have to go on there and insult people or call people names over an opinion, And I think that's one of the things that really bothers me about today's society is that, I've always, the way I look at it is I'm going to basically give my opinion on what I've experienced, what I've observed, and then basically allow you to come to your own conclusion. I'm not telling you to live a certain way. I'm just telling you, think about this. Like the video I shared yesterday about indoor life. Most people don't think about the fact that they spend 90% of their day indoors. So when I talk to people about this stuff, I'm just giving them information so they can come to their own conclusion. I'm not saying, you need to move to the equator or you're going to die. I'm not saying things like that. Like, I don't make these absolute statements. When I make content, my content is basically think about it like this and then come to your own conclusion, as opposed to this is the only way to do it, right? You need to come to your own conclusion because it's your own decision. It's your own life, right? You need to be empowered with good common sense information so you can make the choices that are best for you and your family. I can't do that. I can basically just share my experience from some of the dumb shit that I've done in my life where I've had to learn the hard way. And I could say, hey, I've learned the hard way from doing X. You might want to take that in consideration when you make decisions on how you should live your life. And I'm not saying you should live your life like I do. I'm just providing information. And if you find that valuable, great. And if you don't, that's totally fine as well. And it's the same when I work with people on an individual basis. What people don't understand is there's things called trade-offs, right? There's very rarely a clear, absolute answer, other than you need to live insulin controlled, you need to get your circadian rhythm in order. Those are like things that are like foundational, right? But everything else is like, okay, I want to get really, really jacked. I want to look like these guys on Instagram. Okay, that's great. But one, do you have the body type to do it? Two, it's going to affect your health. And it's probably going to take some years off your life. Are you willing to do that? And there was a time in my life where I was willing to do that. In fact, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, if you'd said to me, and they did this poll with Olympic athletes, you said to me, hey, Jim, here's this drug you can take for 4 weeks. You're going to squat over 1,000 pounds. You're going to bench 800 pounds. You're going to deadlift over 800. You're going to win every powerlifting meet you're in, but you die in a month. I would have said, sign me up. Like, that was the mentality I was in at the time. Like, I didn't understand. Like, when I would go to the gym in my late 20s, I was so obsessed about getting bigger and stronger. I would look at other people doing different things and I would be like, how stupid is that? Like, why would you? I remember talking to a guy who was in his 40s and he was a really good lifter. He had been a really good lifter and still was. And he worked up to like 275 on the squat and did about some reps and that was it. And I was like, dude, like, why aren't you going heavier? He's like, those days are done. Like, I don't want to chase that anymore. I want to be able to move around and play with my kids and feel good. Like, I'm done. I just could not comprehend that at that age. Like, I just could not, because I was so hyper focused on being the biggest, strongest dude I could be. But now pushing 50, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be walking around like a cripple because, one, my body doesn't have the capacity to handle the kind of loads and the intensity that I used to have. And then the energy and the actual like toll on your body. So in order for me to be like that, and I'm still way stronger than the average person, like when I go to, the local gyms and stuff, it's really funny because, when I lift and I'm not even really trying that hard, I'm just, because I've lifted for so long, I'm just so much stronger than the average person, especially now because the average person's strength and preparedness is plummeting. Rob Wolf actually shared an interesting thing on his. It was kind of a scare article, but it was like the vast majority of Americans can't handle intense exercise, and obviously, I think there's variable factors, including certain things that were forced on people. But it's true. Like the vast majority of Americans are in such bad shape that if they did some really hard exercise to the point where it was pushing them to their limit, they might not be able to handle it. And that's just the truth. And so when you have a high level of preparedness, you can get away with a lot more. But you got to remember, whichever goal you're like, people will be like, I want to have a six pack, or I want to be super lean. Well, what are you going to do if your body doesn't like that? What if you start pushing to become super lean and all of a sudden you get Hashimoto's or you get an autoimmune disease because your body doesn't like the fact that you're trying to be that lean? Or on the opposite side of it, what if you're a really big, tall, skinny guy and you're trying to get big and your body's like, doesn't like you being big, right? So if you push being really massive, there's consequences to that. If you push being really, really lean, there's consequences to that. And there's a sweet spot somewhere in the middle where everything, works a lot more efficiently. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I'll take a couple more questions if you guys have any. Hopefully this discussion wasn't too scattered, but my goal is always to make people think about things in a different way. And that's, I watch content from people. I just makes my stomach cringe when I watch their stuff because I want to hear their perspective. I'm always constantly looking at different things and absorbing different things and comparing it to my model. I have a model that I use that has worked well for a long period of time that I've modified over time. And I'm constantly challenging the way I look at things. And then I'm listening, when I'm coaching people, I'm always trying to find ways of helping them develop the habits they need to have the life that they want. Not the life I want for them, the life they want for themselves. And a lot of what I do is trying to figure out for people what they actually want, because a lot of people don't know what they want. A lot of people have no idea what they actually want in their life, in their family, in their job, with their health. They just don't know. And they haven't actually sat down and said, yeah, I just want to look good. I want to work hard. I want to be successful. They haven't thought about these things. They just say, I'm just going to push. I'm either going to do nothing or I'm going to push as hard as I can. And the answer is somewhere in the middle, and it flows, right? So, if you're in a period where you're building a business, and, Stan Efferding talked about this the other day when he was being interviewed, about if you're focusing on building your business, it's pretty hard to be an elite level athlete. That's why a lot of these really smart guys like Shaq and Michael Jordan and these people, they had other people running their business stuff when they were playing. And then once they got out of the sports, like Magic Johnson has made way more money now than he did when he was playing basketball. It's pretty hard to be an elite level basketball player and also be a top entrepreneur at the same time. So you have to kind of push your focus onto what you really, really, really want. So, I'll remind you again, I'd check out the masterclass with Dr. Stillman. It's great. It's totally free. The playlist is in the comments below. We have our testosterone course for men. If you go into our link tree, you'll find links to that. That's for sale to the end of the month, just for a couple more days. There's also a medical program available with that if you live in Florida, if you live in Virginia, if you live in New York. You can do the medical program, or if you want to come hang out with us here in Florida, if you want to take a trip, go to the beach and we come and see you, you can be one of Dr. Stillman's patients and you can participate in the medical program. We actually have a lot of people do that. Usually we get to see at least one or two people a week. We get to meet them in person, and it's great to be able to actually see them and help them with some things. It's a lot of fun to meet people and help them kind of figure out what they want for their life. So until tomorrow, have a great day. Make sure you get outside. Like, I cannot emphasize enough. I sound like a broken record, but the more in touch you get with the sun, the better you're going to do, the more forgiveness you're going to have. I won't go as far as saying, Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate that. I won't go as far as saying if you get enough sun, you can eat shit on a shingle. I think that's a little extreme. But I will say if your sun is in order and you're getting out in nature, your body will be able to handle a lot more uh, stress in general. So have a great day. We'll see you guys tomorrow.